Hello, welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, day 9 of this trial. Looks like there's only a couple of hours left of this case, basically jury deliberations. Just a quick sound test. Do I sound okay? No echo, I hope. I've got the same configuration as we had last time. Do I sound okay before we go on to the before we go into the stream from the court? Sounds good. Okay. Yeah, if you guys want to look at the road trip today, we didn't go anywhere. Both of us worked, but there's going to be some exciting content coming. The only problem is where we're going, there's not really much infrastructure. There's not really Wi-Fi or internet. So although we'll be recording things, it's going to be harder to get it to you. Today, even though we in the capital, it took 2 hours just to upload a single video. In other words, the video is recorded, the video is edited. Just putting it onto YouTube took over 2 hours. So that gives an idea of even in the sort of civilization of Namibia, there's a certain amount of constraint, which makes things a little frustrating. Okay, are you guys ready? Let's go to today's court session and let's hear who is the first defense witness. Again, please let me know if the sound is okay.
Do you swear affirm under penalty that the testimony you give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. All right, thank you. Talk into the microphone.
Does the sound okay?
Good morning, Mr. Montoya. Can you please explain to the jury how you are employed?
Morning.
Oh no, there's an echo.
Montoya, and I am a compliant.
What are we going to do? What are we going to do? Hopefully this works. Okay. Let me know if this is better.
Compliance officer with New Mexico OSHA.
And what do you do as a compliance officer?
I'm a safety inspector. I'm a safety inspector, accident investigator, in summary.
And what do you need to do to become a safety inspector, accident investigator with OSHA?
So is the echo gone? But the other question is the volume loud enough? Is the volume loud enough? Are you guys happy with the volume? Happy with everything? Can we proceed?
Well, you'll require some experience in the field of safety, workplace safety, industrial safety, chemical safety. Accident investigation requires some training, and that can be accomplished on the job.
What does OSHA stand for?
Occupational Safety and Health Administration.
And what is that a state agency?
New Mexico OSHA is a state plan, whereas federal OSHA is at the federal level nationwide.
Okay, so can you guys see where this is going? The first witness the state called and the defense called is from the sort of safety board that did the assessment on rust, and we know what the results of that investigation was, which was that the rust producers were responsible, and it's quite a simple and effective argument. The rust producers are responsible, not individuals, but of course this entity can't prosecute individuals anyway, or they can't investigate individuals. I just want to bring that up. I don't know if you guys can see. Can you see over here on screen? It says the defense called 2 OSHA reps to say the investigation found the management for Rust was responsible for failures, not Guterres. It's actually not true. It's not that Guterres wasn't responsible, just that the management were. The reality is that OSHA typically investigates and finds workplaces and management. It's not really their role to investigate individual employees, right? So that's kind of the gambit from the defense. And I think you'll agree with me, it is quite a effective strategy. You basically just say, you know, there was an investigation and they found the people responsible. End of story.
A bureau part of the New Mexico Environment
Welcome,
Department?
Kate.
Yes.
So tell us about your experience then in workplace safety.
Sure. My experience with occupational safety began in the U.S. Air Force as an aircraft mechanic. I was in charge of our hazardous materials program. Following that, I worked for the New Mexico Department of Health at the Behavioral Health Institute, performing more sort of safety and walkthroughs for our patient health in that scenario.
And how long have you been a safety inspector with OSHA?
Been with OSHA for 5 years.
How did you get involved in the incident we're here for today in this case?
OSHA, one of its duties is to inspect workplace accidents, incidents, or anything that results in a fatality. In this scenario, we were notified of a workplace fatality, and so I was assigned the inspection.
And when you're assigned an inspection that's reported to you, what is the purpose of your investigation?
It's a fact-finding investigation. Our goal is to try to identify what may have caused the incident, so we can either recommend or require corrective measures to prevent such a thing from happening again.
And did you do an investigation of the workplace safety incident that occurred on the set of Rust on October 21st of 2021?
Correct, yes.
What does that mean? What does your investigation entail?
So the investigation is to, if possible, find a root cause for whatever may have led up to the incident. Sometimes things are not so simple and they have a lot of complicated factors that contribute them to occurring. In this scenario, the investigation is to try to identify what led to the accident occurring despite whatever measures may have been put in place to mitigate or prevent in the first place.
And how do you do that? What did you do in this investigation?
So again, I'm going to jump the gun a little bit and just say that what the results of this investigation was that there was like a flagrant disregard for safety protocols, right? And it was an early sign that we were right to pay attention to this case. That there were a lot of people who actually said, nothing to see here. It wasn't an intentional act. And so there's nothing to see here. People are all going after Alec Baldwin because they don't like him, or people are blaming the armorer because she's a scapegoat. Nothing to see here, whatever. But the OSHA report is really the first confirmation that actually there was mischief on the set, and actually things were happening on this movie set that don't typically happen on other movie sets, and not just like a little thing here and there, like a flagrant disregard for safety. And in a scenario where there's a flagrant disregard for safety and one person ends up dead and another person ends up almost dead, shot in the shoulder, you can almost put those two together. That it's as a result of those attitude to safety, or that what's the word, cavalier attitude, that something serious happened in this case. It's not a case that there was just an accident, and it's a case that something very serious happened. Somebody lost their life, and someone else almost lost their life as well, right? So the OSHA report is the first sign that of the sort of idea that where there's smoke, there's fire. That something went on in this movie with Alec Baldwin in it that was not a little irregular, but highly irregular. And we've seen in the Hannah Gutierrez Reid trial some explicit examples of, for example, Alec Baldwin pointing when he's talking to someone, pointing with his firearm, and a lot of other things that are just kind of unacceptable, right?
The same as any. When we conduct investigations, we interview witnesses. We interview members of management.
That's
We
it.
might engage with industry professionals.
Good to
if
see you, Yvonne.
Visit the site, take photos.
Did you do all those things in this case?
Yes.
When was it that you visited the site?
We originally visited, I believe, the following day, October 22nd, was when we were notified.
Did you communicate with the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Department as well?
Only in the beginning, when we were trying to ensure that we would be able to access the site without potentially stepping into a crime scene.
Which witnesses do you remember interviewing in this case?
That day, the only individual present on site was Catherine Rowe Walters.
Okay. And in the course of your investigation, how many witnesses did you interview in this case?
I could only estimate, top of my head. I believe we interviewed 17 people.
Did you say
Did
17?
you interview Ms.
17 people
We did.
Did you interview Mr.
interviewed.
Ball? Did
Hey,
you interview Mr.
Margie.
Baldwin?
Yes.
Did you interview Sarah Zachary?
Yes.
Gabrielle Pickle?
Yes. So, no, wait, not Gabrielle Pickle. Sorry.
Well, not Gabrielle Pickle. That's
Did you
weird.
review any documents in this case that aided in your investigation?
Yes, we reviewed many documents.
Is your investigation?
So something else just to highlight is, aren't you guys surprised that we never saw Lane Looper? You know, Lane Looper is kind of like the whistleblower, like he's kind of like a major whistleblower in this case, and kind of one of the few voices of dissent. You know, he broke his silence early on. He broke ranks with the whole Russ crew, and he was also on interviews fairly early on, whereas everyone else was sort of under like a veil of secrecy. You never heard anything from Dave Halls. You know, when I was trying to find information on Sarah Zachary, I couldn't even find what her face looked like. And there were so many other people, you just heard a little bit from them, and then they went radio silent for months on end. Gabrielle Pickle was one of them. Roe Walters was another one. And so it's like, wow, you know, out of all these characters, the one who was the most vocal, you don't even see him in this trial. What's that all about? And what I think could be the play of the prosecution is they are holding him, they're keeping him for the Baldwin trial. Like he's the absolute star witness for the Baldwin trial. Do you guys agree with that? Helena says, from what I understand, OSHA is the last word in workplace safety. Yeah, that is right. I just can't believe that Lane Looper was very much championing justice for Helena Hutchins, was very passionate and intense and emotional about everything. You know, I don't think he doesn't care about this. I just think they are holding him back for the big kahuna. What do you guys think of that? New Hobby says hope so. Yeah, I think we do hope so.
That you gather documents that you
Generally request any safety policies, programs, or trainings from the employer.
and what specific documents did you review in this case?
Thanks,
In this
Guy,
case, we have
damn it.
requested
Thank you.
any safety policies that they may have, and they provided us with, they're referred to as safety bulletins. And they have a longer title, which I can't recall the name of. They're organized by a committee of some kind. But safety bulletin number 1 is the applicable safety bulletin for firearm safety.
Okay, and what other documents did you review?
They gave us a host of other of these safety bulletins, which cover various miscellanea you encounter on a set, from lighting to electricity and so forth.
What about communications between the various witnesses and cast and crew on set? Did you review any of those things?
We did receive some of those documents, but those did not come from our employer. They came from our individuals that we interviewed.
So the individuals you interviewed, the witnesses, provided you with emails and texts?
Some, yes.
And were you able to come to any findings and conclusions in this case?
We did come to a conclusion.
And were those findings, did you put those findings in a written report?
We did.
Once you do that written report, what's the process there?
We draft the report, proofread it, and when it's completed, we assemble the case file together, and if necessary, we issue citations. And in this scenario, we did issue a citation.
Who did you issue the citation to in this case?
Rust Movie Productions, LLC.
Once you issue, what was the citation that you issued for?
So what do you guys think of Hannah's appearance here? You know, to me, she has changed over the course of this trial from somewhat almost interactive with the camera. At one point, she actually mouthed the word, "That was fucked up," where we could tell that it looked like she'd said that. She seems to have become a lot less visible and interesting. Don't you agree that she's kind of settled down to how she appeared? Her appearance has settled down, and her demeanor has also sort of become like also settled compared to how she was in the beginning.
Why did you issue a citation?
The citation was issued because in our conclusions, we determined that the management team was responsible for a series of failures that, in our opinion, accumulated in an accident.
Okay, and by management team, who do you mean specifically?
Specifically, we mean the chain of command above Hannah Gutierrez, beginning at the lowest level with Sarah Zachary, and then Gabrielle Pickle, and then Dave Halls.
So did your findings then include any, so then your findings that you just spoke of, those didn't include Ms. Gutierrez, right?
As an employee directly engaged in the work, she is mentioned in the report frequently. But in terms of who do we identify as a member of management, and thus.
So I think that is quite an important point, is that this OSHA report did actually mention Hannah Gutierrez Reed frequently. That's his word. He didn't say we did mention her or we mentioned her incidentally. It says we mentioned her frequently. That is actually an important issue and a kind of a problem for the defense.
We consider responsible. She's not. She's just an employee.
Okay. And once you do your report and issue the citation, does the employer, the production company, get an opportunity to contest that?
They do.
And did they contest that in this case?
They did.
Was a fine ever ultimately levied against the employer in this case?
There was, yes.
What was that fine?
Okay, guys, I'm going to try something and it may not work, and hopefully it doesn't disrupt the whole thing. I'm going to mute my laptop because I can barely hear anything. Can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear, or am I muted? Can you guys hear me? You guys can hear me, right? Okay. So let's see if I turn the laptop on, the sound, whether you guys can hear that. Okay, let's try. Let me know if there's any echo.
They came to a settlement agreement with the department.
Is the sound okay?
At $100,000 even.
And in your experience, have you seen the state of New Mexico levy such a high fine like that to an employer for workplace safety ever?
I believe we have in the past.
Is that an average? Is that a
Okay, so that didn't work. I can actually, I'm hearing like, if the sound's on 1, like level 1 out of 10, I'm hearing like level 1. So I can barely hear anything. Obviously, I can hear it when it's on speaker, but then you guys get an echo. So I'm going to have to just go with me barely hearing. Okay. Anyway, let's continue.
usual fine amount that you see?
For typical inspections, no.
Is it higher or lower?
This would be higher than normal.
In your report that you write, once you're completed it, are there any other individuals who review and audit your work?
There are.
Who explain to the jury the levels of review and audit of your findings and conclusions in your report?
Right. So the proofreading, final edits, and that sort of thing fall to first initially my supervisor, and then her supervisor, who is our program manager. And from him, it would pass up to our bureau chief, Bob Genoway, and as well as our legal team. And potentially our department director, all the way up to the secretary. It's potentially something that is a matter of public interest.
And in fact, in this case, did the secretary for the environment department review and audit your report and your findings?
He reviewed the report. By the time it got to him, there was nothing left than just to review it.
Okay. And does your report and your citations, are those a matter of public record?
They are.
And is your report kept in the New Mexico OSHA Environment Department?
Yes.
Did you bring a copy? I saw you walk up to the stand today with a folder. Did you bring a copy of your report today?
I have a copy of our investigative summary. Sometimes we refer to that as a narrative.
Okay, and is that the document that you prepared that we've been discussing this morning? That's 11 pages?
It is 11 pages, yes, so possibly.
Okay.
11
it's this
pages.
document that you make findings and conclusions, right?
Yes, we list them out.
Thanks, Kate. Very kind of you.
Hand the witness what I've marked as Defendant's Exhibit GG. May I approach?
Your Honor, may we approach?
Yes.
Hey, Barbara in New England. Yvonne says OSHA is a big pain when you are not breaking rules, but I guess they do prevent a lot of dangerous events from occurring. Have any of you guys watched the movie The Beekeeper? I just went to watch that with Brian this evening. We were a little bit late to watch Dune 2. So, yeah, any of you watch it? It's pretty intense. What would you give it out of 10?
7.
6, 7. Yeah. Are you guys surprised to see that Jason Bowles didn't open for the defense? Am I right that this is the first defense witness, or was there somebody else? This is the first defense witness, right? I would have thought that Jason Bowles would have kind of kicked it off. The beekeeper is a lot like Jack Reacher. It's got the same sort of principle of someone who's sort of outside the law, kind of an ass kicker. Bria says, my mom said I have to watch it. Okay. It's a little, to me, a little far-fetched, but it does give you kind of a good feeling in a way. But it certainly crosses a couple of lines in terms of what is strictly legal. But if you like Reacher, you probably will like The Beekeeper. It certainly is pretty intense. Kate says, I love bees. Well, then you might like it. But just to confirm, as far as I know, this is the first defense witness, right? Don't you think it's strange that Jason Bowles isn't leading with the defense? But I guess the other side is, as far as I know, the defense only ended up calling about 2 or 3 witnesses. Basically, the defense was 1 day after the prosecution was 8 days. Court started late today. Okay, well, I'm going to jump a little bit ahead because it seems the sidebar is taking a while. Still going on, still going on, still going on. Okay.
May I look at the folder?
Would it refresh your recollection to review your report?
Yes, it would.
Okay. You have it in front of you, or do you want me to hand you a copy?
I do have a copy in front of me, unless yours is highlighted or marked.
Page 7. Okay. So what were your conclusions with respect to whether Ms. Gutierrez was provided enough time to inventory and inspect the dummy rounds from her employer?
We came to the conclusion that she was not afforded time to conduct her duties to the best of her diligence.
And who didn't give her enough time to do that?
She had been instructed by Gabrielle Pickle to focus on other tasks.
So, a couple of things. I think it's totally fair what the defense is saying, that in a way it's not Hannah's fault if she's ordered by her bosses to hurry up, to pay less attention to her armorer duties, and all of that's true. It was a rush set. It was a situation where Hannah was effectively just a part-time armorer, but that doesn't really take away the issue of how did the live rounds get on set, and also just in terms of the firearm, preparing the firearm for Alec Baldwin, that came after a lunch break. It's not as though she was rushed over her feet and it was the end of a workday or something like that. She had plenty of time to do that, right? But what I'm trying to get at is it's a very good argument that others were responsible as well. And I think the danger in this case is a kind of absolute thinking where you think, well, it's either this person or it's this person, right? Instead of saying it's this person and that person, right? And that gives this case a kind of a subtle aspect to it, which I don't know whether the jury are going to be confused by it. I think the Michelle Troconis case is a lot more difficult and in some ways more, actually, I'm not sure if it was more subtle than this case, maybe similarly subtle, but quite subtle in its complexity. And so I wonder whether the jury are going to be able to make sense of this trial in terms of that, that Hannah's responsible, but she's not the only person responsible, and you could even argue she's not the person most responsible. But if you even make that argument, it doesn't mean that she's not responsible whatsoever, right? That's the critical part. Something else I wanted to highlight is, can you see the lady, she kind of looks like a Kardashian, sitting next to Hannah. Her appearance also seems to have been kind of brought down a notch or two. Both Hannah's appearance and that paralegal or the assistant seems to have settled down in terms of her appearance as well. I mean, if you compare her appearance here on trial day 9 to trial day 1, it's also like chalk and cheese, right? Okay, let's continue.
And did you determine whether Rust had any process to ensure that live rounds were not brought onto set?
We determined that Rust did not have any specific processes or procedures to prevent that possibility.
And why was it that was on the employer, in your opinion, versus the armor?
In that manner, the employer is asking an individual to perform multiple safety-related functions for them, while also telling them that they're spending too much time engaging in those safety-related functions and need to devote more time to other duties. And on that matter, we determined that to be maybe a managerial decision.
Okay. And did you conclude whether Rust management provided the armor, Ms. Gutierrez, with any authority on training?
We concluded that she effectively had no authority to make any sort of training decisions.
And in your investigation, was that failure to give the armor authority to determine training, was that a violation of any Rust safety procedures?
It was.
What was that a violation of?
Safety bulletin number 1. One of the required items is that the armor determines when training is necessary and if retraining is necessary based on somebody maybe mishandling a firearm.
Okay, and what evidence, did you see any evidence in your investigation about the armor, Ms. Gutierrez, attempting to attain additional training on firearms for the actors?
Not specifically attempting to retrain, to acquire more time for training, into my memory.
Okay, and was that did the employer, I guess, did Ms. Gutierrez raise any concerns about not being provided adequate time to perform her armor duties?
Yes.
And what in your investigation was Rust's response to that?
Our conclusion was that those statements regarding not having enough time went unheeded and uncommented on.
By whom?
Gabrielle Pickle and possibly Sarah Zachary or Dave Halls.
So, Eric, what do you mean by she's just a person like us? What do you mean by that? I just don't quite follow. Can you elaborate? What do you mean by that, Eric? Good point, Evan.
Sarah Zachary and Dave Halls,
Yes.
did you make any conclusions in your findings in your report about who the rust safety official was on set?
We did.
Who was that?
Dave Halls.
And did you find any fault with anything that Dave Halls did?
So OSHA considers the entire management apparatus to be a single entity. And in this scenario, there are these three individuals who are part of this upper level of management. And Dave Hall's responsibility as the safety coordinator on set. We certainly found that there were a number of safety bulletin number 1 policies that were not followed or adhered to that would fall within his purview.
Okay, and
Okay, so let's venture where angels fear to tread. Eric says, I think she's just a person like us. I'm not sure if who you're referring to, if you're referring to Hannah or someone else. Eric says, people look different. And then he says, I don't think her appearance matters. Again, I'm not quite sure if you're talking about Hannah. Are you talking about Hannah? No, I don't think her appearance matters. Are you talking about Hannah? Just a yes or no answer would be fine. Alias says, whether we like it or not, people will judge on appearances. Francisca says, Hannah was not professional in her presentation on set. Sherry says, Eric has made multiple comments after people talked about her looks. I'm not sure who Eric is talking about here. I'm hoping he's talking about Hannah. Valerie says, appearance matters. Oh, the lawyer on her right. Okay. So, well, that takes the sting out of my counter argument a little. So what I want to say is, well, Eric, first of all, I don't know if it's a lawyer sitting next to her. But let me deal with the question or the comment on, like, head on, where you say, I don't think her appearance matters. I do think, I think her appearance does matter, but I agree that it doesn't really matter that much. The other side of it is, if we're talking about Hannah's appearance, then why is Hannah's if we're talking about Hannah's appearance, we say Hannah's appearance doesn't matter. Why does she look totally different in court than she looked on set? And I would argue, if Hannah on set came into court without a change in hairstyle, without a change in wardrobe, just her appearance would probably be 50% of the prosecution's case. This person is being accused of being too casual and sloppy and unprofessional, and in a way you wouldn't even need too much argument to convince you, because she kind of looks that way, right? And so I do think, if you say I don't think her appearance matters, even if you are talking about I think it's a paralegal, I'm not sure if she's a lawyer, maybe she is a lawyer, but I do think appearance does matter. And if you don't think it matters, I can tell you the defense counsel are very aware of how things look and how things sound, especially on the defense side of the courtroom. Everything is about looks, and you saw the same thing in the Troconis trial. There's a very careful choreography of the family and how Michelle Troconis was dressed, and having earphones in, so it looks like she can't understand English very well. And I think she was even chewing gum in court, so it looked like she's someone who chews gum and puts it on the sidewalk and all that kind of thing. So certainly in a courtroom where it's a jury trial, but just courtrooms in general, appearance matters big time. Big time. Eric says Hannah's appearance does matter. Yeah. So if you're saying the paralegal's appearance doesn't matter, I would say it does, but not very much. It shouldn't really matter very much. But one is also going to, in a way, conflate Hannah with the people around her and conflate the people around the people who are with Hannah as well. I do wonder, and I mean, just how can I put this? Just a thought that's just occurred to me, but stay with me. I do wonder if there's kind of a mind fuckery at work here, where you see Hannah and one or two other people in the defense seats, and when you first see them, that they look kind of exotic, they look kind of strange, you know, they look kind of overdressed, they look kind of extravagant. But then every successive day, they look better, they look more appropriate, they look more tamed. And so one wonders whether the defense purposefully had this strategy of almost purposefully surprising you with somebody looking strange, but then also having them look more and more normal towards the end, so that almost in a subconscious way, you thinking, wow, I actually first thought she was very blah, 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 XYZ, but later on, she's actually looks quite normal. I'm just saying, I wonder whether that appearance transition was deliberate and a kind of mindfuckery. I wonder what you guys think of that. In other words, deliberately making her look very exotic and kind of weird, but then later on making her look very normal and kind of plain and boring. You know what I mean? If we say that appearance is so important and that the attorneys are so conscious of it, then one wonders whether they were conscious of this aspect. Do they not look at Hannah before they go into the courtroom and say, do they not decide this is what you're going to wear, this is how we're going to do your makeup? Is there no discussion about that? I'm sure there is.
Were any
Linda
of those
says that
pertaining
could be a
to
strategy. So it's an
having the
interesting
actors
thought, right?
point guns at crew members?
That is one of the items in the safety bulletin.
And are you saying that Mr. Halls and the rest top level management were in violation of that?
Rust's management team did not take measures that were required in safety bulletin number 1 to permit the aiming of a firearm in a camera or whatever the case might be.
Okay. And you talked a little bit about Rust providing Ms. Gutierrez with sufficient time to thoroughly inventory ammunition. And by ammunition, I mean blanks and dummies. Were there any findings with respect to Rust providing their staff sufficient time to inspect this ammunition to ensure there were no live rounds present?
No, our conclusion was they weren't afforded time. Sorry.
And with respect to whether or not Rust production showed an indifference to hazards associated with firearms, what was your opinion on that?
The conclusion of the Bureau on that was
Hey,
based on
Terry.
the sheer number of requirements listed in safety bulletin number 1 that were either ignored or otherwise not at all followed or totally contrary in practice to. We found that Rust was willful. They were plain indifferent to the recognized hazards of firearms.
Sorry, I've got to ask you guys, what did he say? A plain indifference to the protocol. I kind of missed that part.
The contrary in practice too. We found that Rust was willful. They were plain indifferent to the recognized hazards of firearms.
There's a plain indifference to the recognized hazards of firearms. Okay.
And when you're doing this, does OSHA have a requirement to look at fault of specific employees?
Yvonne, good luck with that
As
doctor's
part of our
appointment.
inspection process, we try to identify a root cause if we can. Whether an accident is caused because someone is falling asleep at the wheel or whatever the case might be, we do try to identify those things. In this scenario, we weren't necessarily able to identify any particular standout reason why an employee would be to blame.
So what was in total bottom line here, the root cause that you found?
To summarize the entire report would be that Rust Movie Productions identified a hazard, a workplace hazard, working with firearms, and they adopted firearms safety policies, but they totally failed to enforce them, train their employees on them, practice them, reference them, nothing. They adopted it and it stopped at the word adoption. Nothing further happened.
Okay. And was it brought?
So I would have put that in a totally different way. I mean, I know I'm not the investigator, but I would have put it in a much stronger way, which is that Rust had a culture of recklessness. The production had a culture that was present with many people on the set that was very sloppy, and that was certainly very unaware of the dangers of firearms. It seems like they were making a cowboy movie, but with the mindset of some other kind of movie. And I think the reason for that is so many people on the staff were either totally green or if they weren't green, they didn't have much experience with armorers. And so the other issue with that is to say, if the culture on this movie set was so slapdash, so strange, so improper, what was the source of that culture? Where did that culture flow down from? What is the source or the epicenter of that culture, right? And what I think is very underappreciated is Alec Baldwin's presence on that set as both a source of fear, but also arguably and potentially a source of chaos, where someone who even wants to do their job is now frightened because of this powerful personality that's there, right? On the other hand, the culture on the film set, isn't it being set to a large extent by Alec Baldwin, who's basically kind of a rule of his own, like what do they call it? He's someone who's a rule unto himself, I guess. You know, when you see him in a scene, he's not the lead actor. He's like the director, the cameraman. He's the whole thing, and it's almost like, although he's the lead actor, he's getting everyone to dance to make him look as good as possible. But but with a total, almost like a total, totally, I don't want to say like on every single occasion they broke rules, but there seems like there were times when there was a total disregard or a total kind of amnesia of the rules. A law unto himself, yeah. But can you see what I'm saying? So if you think of this as a culture, and that the culture in this movie was wrong, who set the tone for the culture? Where did this culture of being a law unto oneself come from? And so if the armorer was also a law unto herself, where is that going to get you? Right? If the armorer is a law unto herself, what's the result going to be of that?
Brought to their attention by Ms. Gutierrez and others that there were deficiencies?
Safety concerns were raised regarding the policies listed in Safety Bulletin number 1 not being followed.
And what was Rust's response to those concerns that were raised by Ms. Gutierrez?
Again, they seem to have chosen to simply not respond.
So Paul raises kind of an interesting point. He says, but surely they will see Hannah's appearance in photos from the time of the incident and draw conclusions from that. Absolutely. But the question is, did the footage emphasize that sufficiently? And I think one could say yes, because there certainly was quite a lot of footage, although you kind of only got glimpses of Hannah in that footage. But then, of course, there's the body cam where you got extended glimpses of Hannah. And I think the glimpses you got right at the beginning and at the beginning of the state's case sort of burn into your mind, right? Hannah's like this kind of peacock jumping around and you just see hair. You don't kind of think armorer or evidence, you just see yellow and purple hair and like what's going on here. So I do think that would make an impression, but the defense, I think, are hoping that the Hannah they see directly in front of them, not on a screen, is going to speak louder than that. And what do you guys think? Should it or shouldn't it? I'm kind of looking forward to the cross-examination. What about you guys? Elias says these workplace cultures usually come from the top down. If things do start at the workers' level, it's usually in response to a leadership issue. And I mean, countries also work like that. Like an entire country, the tone of a democracy can also be set by a leader. Think about JFK and other charismatic leaders.
Mr. Montoya, good morning.
Good morning.
Okay,
Let's,
cross-examination.
A little bit before I get into any of the details, a little bit more about the inspection process that you typically conduct. How long do you have to perform this inspection?
OSHA has a limit of 6 months to the day to initiate and conclude an inspection.
All right. So does that mean that in some instances you may not have all of the evidence that is available from, for example, an investigating law enforcement agency?
Correct.
And in this case, is it true that you did not have the sheriff's report at the time that you issued your report?
Yes, the sheriff's report was the following day or two, I believe.
All right. So just to be clear, none of the information that was included in the sheriff's investigative report made its way into your report and findings, correct?
Correct. Only their initial public release, press release.
The press release.
Only that.
Okay, but not any of the actual investigative materials?
No.
All right. Is OHSV authorized under law to fine or penalize individual employees?
No,
Good point, Nan.
Only employers, correct?
correct.
And as a result of that, I believe you explained that your primary role of investigation is to look at what the employer did in terms of creating a potentially hazardous situation.
What they could do to prevent it or what they did to create it, yes.
Great, thank you. So even if as part of your investigation, you found concerning conduct by an individual employee, you couldn't issue that person a fine, correct?
Not individually, no.
Great. And this is not a criminal investigation that you're conducting, correct?
Correct.
All right. And so you mentioned you did not review the Santa Fe Sheriff's Office report. Did you conduct a forensic download of any of the individuals' phones involved in this incident?
No.
Did you review the over 100 behind the scenes videos that were produced by production outfitters?
No, those were not available to us.
All right. Did you review any footage from the filming of the Rust movie?
Only a small clip that was put into public media.
Was that the clip, just kind of a few second clip of Mr. Baldwin manipulating the firearm out of his bandolier?
Correct.
So all of the other.
So, good point, Top Cat 88. You know, if I was the prosecutor, I would say, I would make a big thing of it. I would say, this person in court is not the same, doesn't look at all like the person that was on the Rust set. And she's put in a lot of effort to try and distance herself and disassociate herself and appear different, but she is actually the same person. So why is she going to so much effort to do that if she's innocent? What is the other thing? Because she also looks very different in the second police interview. But I've got to say she looks different from that second police interview to how she looks in court. I don't think she's worn a single outfit like the one she wore in that second police interview. That kind of, not quite sure how to describe. How would you guys describe what she looked like? Frumpy, kind of driving Miss Daisy look. Yeah, no fanny pack in court. And I mean, it is kind of ridiculous. Like, you've kind of got to say, you know, which is the real Hannah? Now, which Hannah is real? The Hannah that's here in court, or is there another Hannah? And yeah, also like, no, I don't mean that the style she wore on set. You could say it's a punk style. How would you describe the style she had in the second police interview when she kind of dressed in like a kind of a frumpy way? She kind of looked like a you know that show something rescued from polygamy. You see some of the women that are rescued there, that they sort of have almost like a dress code that looks very kind of how women may have dressed, say, 60 or 70 years ago. Catherine Hargrave says the courtroom Hannah is still completely inappropriate. I must say you're right. She does often in court. She's got her chin up. She kind of does look petulant. She does look sullen. She does look uninterested. Okay, let's continue.
videos that were filmed as part of the movie, you did not look at any of those, correct?
Correct.
All right. Did you hire any sort of firearms expert to review the revolver or ammunition?
We did not.
All right. Did you hire or consult with an expert in armor, like film armoring?
No, we did not.
All right. Did you review any of the fingerprint analysis from the FBI?
No.
Did you review any of the DNA analysis from the FBI?
No.
Did you review any of the ballistic chemistry analysis from the FBI?
No.
Are you aware that
Now,
Mr. Terrace-
I can't help thinking the prosecutor is sounding a lot like the defense here, in a way undermining the witness, in a way minimizing what the witness is saying, just as the defense did with the prosecution's law enforcement witnesses, right? Something I meant to mention to you guys, the thoughts I'm almost losing the thought. Okay. In both Sarah Zachary's case and that lady who sort of brings headache pills and the sort of mother lady, I can't quite remember what the correct title is, but basically the lady on set that looks after everyone, makes you a cup of coffee, brings you some sunscreen, I guess, or whatever. If you think about Sarah and that lady, Hannah apparently gave both of them on separate occasions a baggie with white powder in it. Now, if you think about it, imagine if, for argument's sake, you have done something wrong. You are guilty of something, some particular offense. Maybe you've driven too fast. Maybe you didn't wear your safety belt. Maybe you littered, right? And the police are coming to you to knock on your window or to knock on your door, right? So let's say there is a legitimate offense, and you actually have drugs on you. For argument's sake, you've got drugs on you. Why would you give the drugs to a third person, a third party, which in a way can make things worse for you because you've now got a witness against you? Why wouldn't you just flush the drugs away or throw them away? And so what you see with Hannah is on 2 occasions, she gives the drugs to another person. Why do you think she does that? Why endanger yourself by basically saying to that other person, I have drugs, I'm giving you these drugs, or I'm giving you this thing, which could actually get me into trouble? And I would argue that a possible answer to that is, why do you not throw it away, like throw it out the window or flush it down the toilet? Why do you give it to someone? Well, isn't the reason because you want it back? Isn't the reason because it means quite a lot to you? You want it back, you need it back. And I said this on X, if you want it back and you need it back, doesn't that mean you may be addicted, right? It's not just that you can't, the reason you can't throw it away is maybe because you're addicted. And if you're addicted, you're an addict. Does that make sense? Another thing that I find kind of interesting is, and again, you can say, don't judge a book by its cover, but in my, I don't know, say my experience, because it makes me sound like I'm a drug addict, but in terms of the people I've seen around me and in my experience of what I've seen, drug addicts try and communicate that they're drug addicts. So it could be that they've got a very flamboyant hair style or hair color. It could be a heck of a lot of piercings. And I'm not saying if you've got piercings, you're a drug addict. I'm just saying it seems like drug addicts try to communicate that they're drug addicts to other drug addicts. And it's kind of in the language of fairly extreme appearance. So you might have a piercing through your nose or through your chin or through your eyebrow. And, you know, if you say, no, that's completely ridiculous, maybe you're right. I'm not an expert. I'm simply saying that I do think the drug addicts that I know of certainly have strange appearances, if I can put it that way, in terms of tattoos, piercings, hair, and dress. But there seems to be a kind of a dress code that says I'm a drug addict. I'm talking about someone who's heavily involved in drugs, not someone who is sort of a light functional recreational user, right? Okay. And so I'm just wondering whether does Hannah's appearance coincide with that or reflect that, or yeah, is it something like that? And you might say, no, it's not. There's some people who are just creative and they dress differently. But you've got to admit there's a big difference between Hannah's fashion sense and Sarah Zachary's. There's a big difference between Hannah, the way Hannah presents herself, and the way Sarah Zachary presents herself. Is that telling us anything?
Worked in her role as an armorer for 10 of the 12 filming days.
As far as we're aware, it was only permitted 8 days as an armor.
So you would be surprised to hear that she actually was afforded 10 armor days out of the 12 filming days.
It would be news.
Yes, okay, great. Are you aware that Ms. Cook testified at trial that if Ms. Gutierrez had asked for more than those 10 days, she may have granted them if they were justified?
I'm not aware that she testified that.
All right. Are you aware that on the morning of October 21st, 2021, Ms. Gutierrez had approximately 3 hours of time in which she could have inspected ammunition or done a safety check of the revolver involved in this incident?
No.
Are you aware that it's been testified here in the court that Ms. Zachary was
So Zircon says, like, you can almost see the finger in the air. Sarah changed her appearance too. Would you say Sarah changed her appearance a lot? Would you say Sarah changed her appearance in a similar spectrum? The change, like, did she dye her hair? Did she totally kind of reinvent herself?
Gutierrez's supervisor when she was performing props, but that the roles were actually reversed, that Ms. Gutierrez provided instruction to Ms. Zachary with regard to the armorer duties?
Yes, with some interplay in that they're not quite peers.
Great. And do you agree that Ms. Gutierrez in her role as armorer contributed to some of the issues that you identified in your report?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Sure. Do you agree that Ms. Gutierrez in her role as armorer contributed to some of the findings that you issued in your report?
No, I'm not sure I could necessarily agree.
Okay.
That's quite an interesting question. Good question from the state. Do you agree that Ms. Gutierrez Reed's actions may have contributed to the situation on set? And he answers, no, I don't agree.
Give me just a minute.
They never did a drug test as far as I know.
If you were to return to page 4 of your report. On paragraph 13,
okay.
The last sentence, unless a round is
You know, I think him stifling a yawn, that wouldn't happen when his own co-counsel are doing their thing. You know, there may be a little bit of a psychological game going on. If he's yawning, he's kind of saying to the jury, nothing to see here, right?
Removed from a store box or firearm and inspected, it cannot be verified as a dummy round. Do you believe that that is the function of an armorer to perform this inspection that you've indicated on this report?
I believe that would be one of their many functions, yes.
Right. So if she failed to do that, then would she have contributed in this regard?
OSHA's opinion is that management has to enable the work to be done in the first place. So if she didn't do that, our question would be, why wasn't someone ensuring that she would do that? And thus we would turn back to management.
Okay, sure. And that gets back to the whole fact that you're looking at the employer primarily as the basis of your investigation, correct?
Correct.
All right. Do you agree that if Ms. Gutierrez loaded live ammunition into a firearm and then passed it off as a cold gun, that would be a workplace hazard?
Certainly.
All right. And then lastly, are you aware, I believe you conducted an interview with Ms. Gutierrez, correct?
Correct.
And in that interview, she indicated to you that she asked 2 producers for additional training time, correct? Do you recall that?
I don't recall it off the top of my head.
Okay. All right. Nothing further.
Redirect.
That little hypothetical that Mr. Lewis just said, if Ms. Gutierrez had passed off a loaded gun as cold, would that be a workplace hazard? What if Rust had not allowed the armor sufficient time to inspect that gun and rushed her and instructed her specifically of what they wanted her to do? Whose fault would it be then?
So just FYI, guys, I'm not going to be
So
covering this case
in that,
tomorrow.
Mrs. Stevens, if there was a gun passed off as cold, whose fault would it be, or whose responsibility would it be to ensure that the armor had sufficient time and resources to make that?
Just because I'll be in a,
It's always
sorry, let's just pause that.
responsibility of-
I won't be covering this case tomorrow because I'm going to be kind of in the middle of nowhere, basically. So it's possible at the next hotel there'll be internet, but if I can make a prediction, it's probably going to be 30% as good as here. In other words, basically just not strong enough. I can see on StreamYard it's showing 1 out of 3 bars. It sort of goes 2-1, 2-1. So it's a weak signal. But I think where we're going is going to be even weaker. So if it's strong enough, we'll do trial day 10, which will probably be the last trial day. But I'm anticipating that I won't be able to.
management to supervise effectively.
Thanks, Zircon.
And quality control effectively. If an employee is conducting a safety-related task, they pass it off as safe, and supervision does nothing with that, and they allow it to be implemented. Supervision's responsibility to double-check that.
And was it also Rust's responsibility to ensure that the employee had to take those, I guess, did your investigation reveal that Ms. Gutierrez had specifically requested more time to do those safety checks?
She had expressed on more than one occasion that she did not have sufficient time.
Rust's response, was there any fault in Rust's response to Ms. Gutierrez's concerns and requests?
In one scenario, Gabrielle Pickle responded that to the point that there are no more armor days out of the 8 left. She had responded that then no more training days are to occur. So their response has been to just, okay, we'll cut it then.
Cut off the firearm training days.
Right.
And did you actually receive a copy of the Santa Fe Sheriff's report after this report of yours came out?
Our office received a
So look at Hannah's face over there. She does look kind of bored. She just kind of have a spaced out look even. She looks like she maybe hasn't had enough sleep. But another way to interpret her appearance is that she looks almost a little bit haggard. She looks a little bit worn out, doesn't she? Is that by design, do you think? In other words, is the idea that she looks like she's a victim, or that she looks like a victim?
copy, yes.
And had you guys previously requested that many times from them?
We had previously requested whatever documents they'd be willing to share or assist with.
And this is to review fingerprints to determine whether Rust Management demonstrated an indifference to hazards and violation of their own standards. Do you have to look at fingerprints to do that?
No,
Do you have to look at DNA to do that?
no.
Or any firearms expert?
Not to determine their safety conduct and so forth, no.
And were there any other communications that you reviewed between Ms. Gutierrez and Gabrielle Pickle that demonstrated or supported your findings that Rust was at fault in this and not Ms. Gutierrez individually? I'll rephrase the question, Your Honor.
We're going to strike that question. Go ahead. Take another one.
Are there, you said that you can, is it true that you can actually find fault with specific individuals' conduct?
May I ask you to clarify?
Yeah, can you find fault with, when your investigation, your specific individuals, and can you say that individual was wrong for doing this?
Okay, another sidebar. While they're sidebarring, Valerie makes kind of interesting comment that it's infuriating that she has never once looked intense, upset, emotional. I must say, I've seen her looking upset. You saw her swearing under her breath. You've seen her shaking her head
And Ms. Gutierrez,
quite a few
that
times.
was evidence of Rust not providing Ms. Gutierrez with the necessary resources that she needed.
I will say that in general, I agree that what's a little bit strange is that, you know, she's only in her 20s, and you would look at the guy yawning behind her. But you would imagine that Hannah would be, even if she's innocent, even if she's guilty, you would imagine that Hannah would be traumatized in a way. You would imagine that she would be, that this would have affected her, you know, affected her career, affected her livelihood, affected her life. You would also expect, just given the sort of jolt to her whole life, that she's had to put her whole life on hold, that in a way she's the subject of you know, a lot of articles and media attention and so on, that this has taken a lot out of her. But instead, you know, you don't see one tear. You know, when they're talking about the incident in the church, I think a lot of us have been more appalled, and one kind of gets a sense of what Alina went through. and one kind of has a sense of shock and dismay, and I don't know what else one can call it. Just, it is upsetting, and yet you don't really see that on her face, where she should be the most upset of all. And yet we have seen her upset. We have seen her almost, I don't know if she's breaking down or just at the beginning of it, but when the officer says, stay calm, take a breath, something like that, she seems to be quite emotional, and she seems to be kind of in tears. I don't know if you see any tears, but she seems to be quite upset. In reality, though, if you take this entire arc of this case from the one end to the other end, have we ever really seen Hannah in tears?
Off the top of my head, there was a text conversation and then a separate email.
That's very well put, Elizabeth.
He hasn't told what it was. Without stating what the text conversation is, can you please continue your answer?
Yes, and a separate email conversation.
Okay, so you reviewed actual texts and emails between Gabrielle Pickle and Ms. Gutierrez.
We reviewed screenshots of their texts and emails, yes.
Okay. And the relevance of without saying what's in it, the relevance of that informed which findings in your report?
Yes.
Which ones?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, the conversations you reviewed between Gabrielle Pickle and Ms. Gutierrez. What did those pertain to in terms of your findings? Which findings did that?
Apologies. Yes, so I would have to review the text versus the email conversations to remember which one is which. One is regarding the notification regarding that they have used all 8 of their armor days and the no further training then, because that would require more days. And then the other conversation, I believe, was.
So do you notice with Hannah, she kind of has a chin in the air. She listens with a chin in the air, almost like it's discomfort. It's inconvenience for her to be in this position to begin with. But she's almost like she's wearing that I'm being inconvenienced on her face. So, which is why it comes across as pouting and petulant.
Regarding firearms being left unattended or something of that nature.
Okay. And what was your finding? And if you need.
Another thing that is kind of weird is when Hannah was on set, she wore glasses, and you would almost imagine that in court, if she wore glasses, she would look more intelligent, she would look more sensitive, she would look more professional, all those things. Of course, I think what the defense are really aiming at is to make her look as little like the Hannah, even if it includes glasses, on the set as possible. And so they're trying to make her look unrecognizable. So the prosecution are making a case, and so the mindfuckery is to say, well, that's not the same person. This is Hannah right here. They're saying Hannah is that person, but you can clearly see she isn't. And that could raise doubt in one person's mind, where they say, I don't know, that I don't think that she's like that, or whatever it is. Catherine says, I find the comments about her demeanor judgy. Okay. You might not like this channel then, because we look at demeanor quite a lot in a trial. We did that in the Troconis case as well, and I think quite effectively, trying to see who the real Michelle Troconis was, as opposed to the Michelle that she was affecting. Stockton, Russia, and John Denver. Unlikely. I wouldn't say we're here to judge. I would say we're here to analyze. We're here to think critically.
refresh memory by looking at your report, that's fine, but what was your finding with regard to firearms being left unattended?
Okay, another sidebar. Let's see if we can jump ahead to the next witness. Do you guys agree?
Well, I work with the inspector throughout the course of an investigation. Once an investigation is assigned, and once a draft report is produced by the inspector, it will go through various levels of management review. And for this type of a case, for a fatality investigation, I would normally review the entire case file, including a narrative report and other portions of the case file to ensure that if we're issuing citations that they meet with certain requirements of legal sufficiency.
So you reviewed the entire case file. What is in that case file?
The case file will contain documentation obtained from.
So that's another
employer.
OSHA
Also
representative.
contain documentation from other sources, medical investigator reports, any type of police reports that are available at the time, photographs, audio recordings, interviews of employees and other witnesses, and then the documents that are produced by our bureau, including an inspection report and narrative.
And when you review that and review the report, in this case, did you review Mr. Montoya's report pertaining to the fatality at the Rust production site on October 21st, 2021?
Yes.
And did you concur with that report?
Yes.
Did you make any changes to that report?
Yeah, it
Strictly,
is
any report will go through
alleged drug
minor
usage, which is
editorial
unfortunately a
changes,
weakness
again,
of
to
the
ensure that
state's
the
case.
the content meets with legal sufficiency prior to issuance of a citation. So yes, I'm sure.
Okay, I think we're gonna, are you guys happy if I just jump? Because it's just another OSHA investigator. Let's go to the next
What
witness.
exactly is it that your bureau is
You
investigating?
guys happy?
for?
All right, Mr. Elliott, I want to.
I wonder where Hannah's family is. Like, it doesn't seem like your father attended trial to support her.
About the projectile not matching the gun. I'm not sure that I fully understand what your concerns are in that regard. Would you articulate them for us again?
Yes, I was referring to the concerns that a detective would have upon arriving at scene. You don't have at the time, the results of lab testing. So, and you have nothing guaranteed.
What do you mean, nothing guaranteed?
Well, at the time, you had some people saying this is the gun. But
Who is
didn't
this
have
guy?
any
I don't actually know. I
evidence,
think
scientific
we may have,
evidence to show that was
he
the
may have
gun.
been introduced before the break. Oh, sorry, here he is. Sorry about that. If you look at Hannah here, the earring, the pin in her hair, the coif in her hair, you know, there's quite there's a curl coming down there. There's a ring. The suit that she's wearing, all of it seems to speak about someone who's conscientious. It definitely tells a different story to the Hannah on the set.
Next witness.
Okay.
Also, I meant to mention she's got fingernails painted. Were fingernails painted when she was an armorer? Was she wearing rings when she was armorer? There he is. So it seems like I've got it wrong. They didn't just call 2 witnesses, and the defense haven't finished their case. I'm not sure what made me think they had. I think it was a tweet from Court TV that suggested that that was the case, but it seems like it's not.
Given this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. All right, have a seat, talking to the microphone.
I agree with you, Eline.
Good morning, sir. Can you please state your name again for the jury?
Scott Elliott,
Mr. Elliott, what do you?
Scott
do for a
Elliott.
living currently?
I'm a private investigator.
And Mr. Elliott, prior to becoming a private investigator, did you have a career in law enforcement?
Yes, I did.
Can you tell the jury what your career was in law enforcement, how many years?
Military and civilian, or just?
Let's just start with civilian and we'll work back.
Okay. I was hired by the Albuquerque Police Department, and I attended the academy starting in February of 1993. I retired in 2011. During that time period, I started out field services, normal uniform patrol. I went to the gang unit. Then I became a violent crimes detective in about 1995, 96. And in 1998, I became a homicide detective. And I was a homicide detective when I retired in 2011.
So, sir, you spent approximately, it sounds like 13 years in homicide division?
Part of that was interrupted by post 9/11 deployment, but yes,
Like post 9/11, did you deploy overseas?
I did.
And was that part of your, and we'll get into your military, part of your military duties?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Sir, how many, as part of your homicide portion of your APD employment, approximately how many investigations do you think you worked on in homicide?
As a case agent, 35 or 40, assisting on homicides, 150, 200.
And this is just homicides. You probably had 150, 200 in terms of violent crime or other types of narcotics or any types of, how many investigations do you think you've handled in the course of your police career? Do you even have an estimate?
I don't think so. I became a detective in 1995. Hundreds of cases a year. And then by the time I was in violent crimes, it was slightly reduced, but that was all violent crime short of homicide. So lots of those.
And you also talked about your military service. Can you
Okay, I
tell-
think now's a good time to ask a couple of kind of global questions. What, ideally, what would be, or who would be the best witnesses? I'm saying not who are the best witnesses, who would be the best witnesses if you could wave a magic wand? Like if you could handpick witnesses, but that would be favorable to Hannah, who would be at the top of your list? And to help you guys think about that, think about, are any Rust colleagues going to be testifying? I mean, it might be too early to answer that, but what do you think? Do you think there are going to be any Rust how can I put this? Do you think anyone from Rust, actors, crew, colleagues, do you think anyone from that production is going to be testifying in Hannah's defense? Catherine says, I'm surprised her father didn't come to this trial. Maybe he's trying to protect his own image. Well, I think he's 81. So that may be a factor, but it is kind of surprising because he was interviewed and he appeared in the media. Initially, he seemed to be very squarely behind his daughter, right? His stepdaughter. Yeah, so if you could snap your fingers and kind of get a dream witness, it would probably be someone like Sarah Zachary. Hannah was my employee in a way, or Hannah worked for me, or I supervised Hannah, and she was a great worker, and she was very conscientious, and she was very disturbed and concerned when there was a accidental discharge. And you know, there's no way Hannah brought a live round on set, that kind of thing. But the weakness, I think, to the defense case is that they're trying to defend Hannah with people that are totally off the Rust production, which I think shows that Hannah doesn't really have that much support. But I could eat my words. I mean, I could be wrong. They might come up with someone on the production. I think she was friends or friendly with the prop truck driver. Question is there still some connection to them?
With the military.
Yes, I was commissioned in 1981 in the infantry. I spent approximately 10 years on active duty, various duties as part of the active duty time, and then I left the service in active duty in 1992 and 1993.
So after Sarah Zachary, or even almost on a par with Sarah Zachary, I would say if the producer could give her like a testimonial that Hannah was a model employee, she dressed funny, but she had this incredible knowledge of firearms that she got from her father. She was just like this Wizard of Oz with firearms, and just absolutely brilliant. And the cast were mesmerized by her, blah blah blah. But do you think we're going to see anything like that? Do you think there's going to be one producer that basically says hiring Hannah was the best thing we ever did? Right? Think that we're going to see that?
Started with the police department. Then I transferred into the reserves. In Albuquerque, there was not an infantry unit anywhere nearby. So I was an engineer officer for a little while, and then I became a secondary specialty of military policeman. And I worked in those functions until I transferred from the Army in 2003 to the Air Force. When I transferred to the Air Force, I took command of what's called a heavy weapons squadron, which is a security forces unit, which is Air Force Police. The difference with that unit is that they had weapon systems that are normally found in the Army. Mortars, snipers, grenade launchers, things like that. So my prior Army career folded right into that unit and its mission.
Well, sir, you've
Thanks a lot,
conducted
Barbara.
investigations, both civilian and military environments. Is that correct?
Yes, that's true.
Okay, Your Honor, at this time, I tender Mr. Elliott as an expert in quality of investigations, law enforcement investigations.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the first thing you said, Mr. Johnson.
Oh, sure, the quality of law enforcement investigations.
No objection.
All right, he's an expert, as described.
Mr. Elliott, can you tell the jury specifically, what did you do in this particular case? Just an overview scope.
Well, I reviewed all the discovery, all the reports, videos, any documentation, any evidence that included going and physically looking at the evidence in this case. In addition to that, I interviewed the majority of the state's witnesses in what's called pretrial interviews. I think the only ones I didn't interview were the FBI employees.
Do you recall ballpark how many interviews?
Okay, well, so I've tried two things and both of them improve the sound for me, and then you don't have any sound. So that's definitely too bad.
I'm sorry.
Quality of the investigation by the sheriffs at the scene.
Yeah, some of that was reached by my own observations and some of it through interviews of the deputies on the scene. I felt like their response was probably not what it should be. There were hundreds of people on that ranch, but if you narrow it down to who was in the church at the time of the shooting and who may have had involvement with the case, for example, the people that were just outside, there was really about 20 people. The first responding deputies.
Now I can't hear
their job is
anything.
first preservation of life, and then it is preservation of evidence and identifying. In this case, it was known very quickly who the shooter was, but it wasn't known who the witnesses were. And those witnesses, once they were identified, they should have been segregated so they couldn't talk among themselves.
Now, let me stop you right there. When you initially, as a law enforcement homicide detective or somebody going on scene, you identify the shooter, what in your opinion is one of the first things that you should do?
Well, the first thing you do is put someone with that individual, segregate them from everyone else. You also want to, those individuals, since you are preserving evidence, you also want to secure their cell phones.
Now, in this case,
Thanks,
in the
Maria.
materials you
Thank
reviewed,
you.
did it appear to you that Mr. Baldwin was segregated?
Not at all.
And along with the conclusion you just stated, did it appear that his cell phone was taken from him?
No, it was not.
Mr. Elliott, did it appear to you that at any time at the scene that day, Mr. Baldwin was segregated?
He was not.
Next, you talked about identifying key.
So have you noticed how Hannah's lawyer has always defaulted to going after Alec Baldwin? Like, you kind of get the sense that his number one guy, and I mean, he's also said that Hannah doesn't have any power, that Hannah is the scapegoat, that Hannah, was the least powerful person on the set. He keeps defaulting to the person who was responsible, being Alec Baldwin. Do you guys notice that?
Witnesses
And so here what he's talking about is, was Alec Baldwin segregated? Where was Alec Baldwin? And there are important questions.
preserving evidence. Can you explain that a little more?
Yes. Well, the scene was secured. You don't often have a scene of that small of an environment. It was known immediately that the shooting occurred inside that church structure, and that it probably involved couple of people just outside near that weapons cart. So that was the immediate concern, that area there. And the deputies, one of the early responding deputies did get a pretty good list of who was in the church and gave that to the lieutenant. But those individuals were not segregated from everybody else. They were able to mingle with people who were not on scene, who were in a different part of the ranch. Conversations were taking place. People were talking on cell phones. And it's really unknown who they were talking to.
And what is the danger or what is the concern on the part of an investigator when suspects or witnesses are talking?
Well, a couple things. One, people could be getting their story straight. The other is it causes witnesses to misremember what they did and what they saw. Because in my experience, good, honest citizens try to help. And they'll tell you something that their neighbor told them as if it was something that they saw. And it is just human nature that if you talk about something over and over and over again, eventually there are parts of it that you think that you did, and it was what someone else did. So you want to clean, even if it's very brief and they didn't see very much or they didn't hear very much, you want a clean statement of what their knowledge is.
Okay, and with regard to whether, if that is not done, what can that lead to? What is your conclusion about what can happen if people are not segregated and they're allowed to talk to people?
Well, one, you can delete things off your phone. You can delete photos. It wasn't known at the time if somebody was videotaping what was going on inside on their phone. That's possible. Almost every case you work now, someone has videotaped it with their phone.
Did you also determine, and this is another point, but that someone had left the scene and whether that person had been identified?
As far as I know, they still have not been identified.
Good point, Joe.
With regard to securing the prop card on that scene, what is your opinion as to whether that was appropriately handled?
No, it should have remained in place. There was an individual, Brian, was told to go get the cart. He went out of sight behind the church, on the other side of the church, and then he moved the cart around towards the lieutenant's marked unit. That should not have been done.
As well, what is your opinion as to or do you have any concerns about how the evidence on top of the prop card was handled?
Well, Lieutenant Benavides took possession of the firearm with an ungloved hand, and he grabbed it right around the cylinder. So the largest portion of the revolver is how he picked up the revolver, put it into his vehicle, at another occasion pulled it out of his vehicle and put it back on the cart. He did the same thing with the ammo boxes from the cart. So you definitely can't preserve evidence by touching things with your bare hands, but it also could have damaged anything that was on the boxes or the firearm prior to him handling it.
Now, working our way through this, and you may be aware that there was evidence there were rounds thrown away in the course of your investigation. What is the...
So can you guys see the person directly behind Hannah? He's picking his teeth. I don't know, I guess he's got something stuck in his teeth, right? And the only reason I'm highlighting that is to show you how easily you can forget that there's a camera on you. So make no mistake, Hannah knows there's a camera on her. The guy sitting behind her probably knows, but has forgotten about it for the moment right now. But there are probably also moments when Hannah has been on camera when she forgets, right? If you were on camera, would you do what that guy's doing right behind her?
Do you have any concerns at this point with how the police responded to that?
He's still doing
The
it.
sheriff's responded to that matter.
Well, it's my understanding that
Let's hope he
they're notified quite late.
hits pay dirt.
A month later. But I didn't see any attempt to go out and see if they were still in the trash at the ranch.
And is that something in your normal investigation, when you were doing homicide investigation, you want to collect all of the potential evidence?
Well, in this case, there's a couple things. The law enforcement was told almost immediately, this was the firearm used. But the projectile can't be matched to a firearm. And I know there were at least 3 .45 long Colt revolvers on that cart that day. So although the casing has been tested to match.
Did you guys know that Hannah had her own firearm? That Hannah owned her own firearm? Just do a quick test your knowledge in chat. Did you guys know that Hannah had her own firearm? Let's see what you guys say. Really? So question 1, did you know that Hannah had her own firearm? Michael says no. Mel says no. Chelsea says yes. Zircon says yes. Tamara says, I assumed that. Ron says yes. Jojo says no, but it makes sense that she would have one. Okay, so that's the first question. Did you know she did have a firearm? Now the next question is, and one of you sort of answered it correctly. What was that firearm? And this is going to blow some of your socks off. Do you know what kind of firearm she did have? Let's see who gets the answer right. There we go. She had a long Colt, a 45 long Colt, right? She had a 45 long Colt, the exact same firearm that Alec Baldwin was using when he shot Helena, right? And so let me ask you a third obvious question. When Hannah was not working, what do you think she did with that 45 long Colt? Do you think she put dummy rounds in it? Do you think she put blanks in it? What do you think she put in it? So Hannah's own private firearm is a 45 long Colt. When Hannah's not working and Hannah's not on set, what do you think she would put in that firearm? Do you think she'd put dummy rounds on a non-prop weapon? Right? She would use live rounds. So then you say, how could live rounds make it on set? Well, isn't that a very big part of the answer? Isn't that a very big part of a kind of inferred likelihood? Does that make sense? Quite a shocking, what do you call it? It's quite a shocking revelation if you didn't know that for it to come out at this point, trial day 9, right?
It's the firearm that's presented to law enforcement.
So you kind of get the idea that Hannah liked playing around with live rounds on a 45 long Colt. Guess what happens? The cinematographer gets shot with a gun that is like her gun with a round that is a live round. The sloppy armorer,
The projectile positively came from that.
did she make a mistake getting her live rounds mixed up with dummy rounds?
Along with the rounds that were thrown away, did you have any other concerns on the follow-up with regard to identifying the source of that live round or live rounds that appeared on set?
That didn't seem to be followed up on very strongly. It's a little confusing when rounds came onto the set or the scene, the ranch, and who brought them. it seemed that there were a number of times that, at least one occasion, I thought it was more, that Sarah went to PDQ in Albuquerque and brought ammo back. There was the initial ammo provided by PDQ, and then there was some ammo provided by.
I'm probably going to do 5 more minutes.
And did you identify any other investigative steps that you think should have been taken to try to further look into the source of the live rounds?
Well, there's been a lot of talk about the white boxes with the JS.
So, Michael says, has that been mentioned in court, or how do you know that? Let me take that question into chat. Has it been mentioned in court? How do we know that? What do you guys say? How do we know that? What do you guys say? Eric says it's a big surprise. Jody says police interview. Catherine says no matter how messy the prop card was, there should have been 0 chance. Terry says her social media. Silent Murmur says, I think Hannah admitted to owning a firearm during the interrogation. Does anyone know the answer? Let's give it another moment. Robbie says, did you say they mentioned it today in court? I did know she had her own random ammo. Okay. Is there anyone who knows how we know that she had her own firearm? As far as I know, it was Seth Kenny who revealed that. When Seth Kenny was interviewed, that's how we know. It could also be her father, and she could also have said the same thing. The man in the hotel room, no. Silent Murmur says Hannah was asked if she owned a firearm. She said yes. Yeah, well, I suppose I don't think I know from her social media, but I guess her social media does show that. She did have ammo in the hotel before filming, but I don't know if they saw. That's actually quite a good point. That hotel clerk, I think, did see a firearm that looked like a 45 long Colt, and that may have been hers. Yeah, that's right. But to be honest, I don't know how I know. I think I heard Seth Kenny saying that, and Seth Kenny also saying something about, did you know that Hannah was firing after work? Of course, that's you've also got to take that with a pinch of salt. If he says that, does it mean it's true? So one's also got to take that into account.
That individual has never been interviewed, the producer of the ammunition. So there really was no backtracking of where the ammo came from. You can't say this ammo on the prop cart definitively where it came from. You can't say the ammunition in the prop truck definitively where it came from. There should have been more work done in that area.
And when you're in a situation like this, as a former homicide detective, when you're trying to trace the root cause of tragic situation that's occurred, is that something that would be important to you to find out where the live round originated from?
Yes, this case is also a little unusual in the sense that it wasn't really a whodunit. It was a why done it and how done it. By that, I mean, you don't know anybody there. You go out as an investigator, you're trying to find out what.
Do you agree with him that it's not a whodunit? Do you agree with this investigator that this case is not a whodunit? Silent Movement says, I remember it came out in the police questioning. I mean, of course it's a whodunit. Who was responsible for safety breaches? Who gave Baldwin the firearm? Who loaded the firearm? Who checked the firearm? Who was responsible for the safety of the firearm? That's definitely a who aspect. So seems kind of weird. Also, I don't know how you can say it's a why done it, because there's no motive here. You know, the only motive sort of is what you conflate with the culture on the set. The only motive here is what you conflate with the how can I put it? The interests and ambitions of the individuals individually, and also the production as a entity, you know, what they wanted to achieve, what they wanted to prevent. But certainly in terms of the incident itself, there's no motive, because I don't think anyone, and I don't think there's any doubt about it, no one intended to kill Helena and injure Joel. So there's effectively, in terms of the incident, there's no motive. If you're going to talk about how did it happen, well, there is an answer to that, but that's not motive. That is dynamics and a pattern of behavior and protocol violations.
What happened? Was there an argument on set? Was somebody angry? Did somebody have a mental break?
I know what you mean when you say the motive is negligence, but that's not really a motive. A motive is what you want to happen. Negligence is something that happens kind of by, it kind of happens by association. So negligence isn't really a motive, but I know what you mean. Because this whole case centers around negligence.
Is there some underlying relationship that may have been the root cause of the shooting? You don't know. And that's why an investigation is conducted, to find out those things. And it's also to trace how that firearm came to be where it came.
So Michael says, are you sure that no one wanted to sabotage? My answer is yes. And I would say the difference between, let's say, this channel, I don't know if there are other channels out there that are saying, that are entertaining that theory. That's the defense theory, by the way. And the defense theory is actually, in a way, derived from the police suggesting that as a possible motive, as a possible scenario. And so and Hannah was appalled by that idea at the time, but then it subsequently became part of her defense case. Anyway, the difference, I think, between this channel and maybe another channel that might talk about that quite a lot is, I'm not trying to be sexy, I'm not trying to be popular, I'm not trying to be shocking or entertaining. I'm just trying to tell you what I think happened here. And I think it's extremely clear that that's not what happened. And I think if you don't understand this case very well, then you're still thinking about that.
Came to be.
Okay, sir, and with regard to the search of the prop truck that occurred after the 21st, on the 27th, did you have any concerns with the delay in that search warrant?
Oh, absolutely. There were firearms missing from the weapons cart. They had been moved from between the shooting and the arrival of law enforcement. And they were moved into the safe, into the prop truck. That should have been part of an expanding scene. Like I said, you had the church and the area immediately outside of it. But as soon as it became known the prop truck had an involvement with that shooting, the prop truck would have been secured, just like you saw the scene, crime scene tape, the deputy placed there, nobody allowed in the truck.
Good
until
point,
such time
Catherine.
as into the search warrant.
In addition, with regard to the search warrant of Seth Kenny's business, PDQ Props, did you have any concerns about the delay of approximately a month in searching that business?
Oh, of course, of course. A delay of a few days could be an issue, but a month is, you could do anything in a month.
And from your review of records in this case, was it ascertainable that Mr. Kenny was one of the suppliers of ammunition to Rust?
I think it was known almost immediately, both by the people at the scene and Mr. Kenny himself.
With respect to that delay in search warrant, there's some obvious things I think that would be apparent to anybody. But why is that an issue? What are the primary issues that you want to do to try to secure a home and search it right away, secure a business, search it right away? What are the reasons?
Well, it's preservation of evidence. If no one can get inside the business, then no one can tamper with anything that's inside. And you hope to get everything as it was as soon as you can, without any type of alteration.
With regard to Mr. Kenny, did you also have any concern?
Okay, guys, we're going to jump ahead just a few minutes. I'm going to wrap it up quite soon. I just want to hear the beginning of the state's cross.
Or concerns about the quality of the
You seem to take issue with the fact that Lieutenant Benavides touched the firearm with his ungloved hand. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
But you agree with me that unlike a lot of homicides or shootings, this one occurred in the presence of upwards of a dozen people.
That's true.
So there was not going to be any mystery as to who had the gun and who pulled the trigger, correct?
To that aspect, no.
You seem to take issue with the fact that the projectile in this case can't be matched to the firearm, right?
Only in the sense that to confirm that the firearm presented to law enforcement was the actual firearm. It doesn't really change what happened.
But where's the controversy? Do you have some information that the jury hasn't heard, that the gun that was fired by Mr. Baldwin is actually not the gun that was used? I haven't come across that. Have you?
Yeah.
I was referring to when the officers arrived at the scene, they didn't know that other than what one person told them.
Okay, but it turned out to be true. There's no controversy.
Yeah,
The
that's
gun that was
pathetic.
used in the gun that was in Mr. Baldwin's hand, right?
True.
Okay.
And I mean, they're like detailed footage of that gun. So to say we can't say that that's just the gun is ridiculous. So I just want to respond to Silent Murmur's questions here quickly. Why would Alec Baldwin aim the weapon at Helena and pull the trigger. I don't think he was aiming it at Helena. I think he was aiming it at the camera. He was trying to aim it. The idea was that you were going to, the camera is going to stare down the barrel and you could actually see those rounds in it. Right? So that's the first answer. The idea was for the firearm to be directed towards the camera, not to Helena. Helena was the camera person, and so it was effectively directed towards her. Remember, she was shot under the shoulder. She wasn't shot in the middle of her chest. She was shot in a different way. Then Silent Murmur says, why did he feel it was so necessary? And I think the answer is obvious, because he was preoccupied and committed to verisimilitude. He was trying to get an authentic, he wanted to look as real as possible as a not a sharpshooter, but like a crack cowboy, like the deadliest gun in the West kind of thing. So he's trying to make a movie where his lethality is not in dispute, where he's the sort of aging gunslinger, and that is impressive. And I mean, I've just watched the Beekeeper, and there are a lot of action scenes in, and the whole idea is to make that guy look extremely deadly. And although it's very over the top, you do kind of get a sense that, wow, he knows what he's doing. It's the same thing. It's trying to convey of this character a deadliness and that it's all true. That he's got a gun, it's loaded. It's the fact that the firearm is pointed at the camera means that the audience watching in the cinema, the gun is pointing at them, directly at them, and that you get a little bit of a fish jumping in your stomach moment where there's a little bit of fear, where you're like, well, this is what it must feel like to be facing that firearm just before it discharges. And that turned out to be very real in reality. Also, Silent Murmur says, why didn't he aim to her side instead of her body? Well, ultimately, he did shoot her in the side, but I know what you mean. Why didn't he just do it off camera? That is what he was supposed to do. But you kind of got the idea that he was trying to get the most realistic and best shot that he possibly could. So that's, I think, the answer. Do you agree with that?
And the reason that the projectile can't be matched to the firearm is because the projectile went through two people, and it was so heavily damaged because it went through two human beings. There wasn't enough marking to match it to the bore of the gun. Isn't that true?
That's true.
Now, in terms of fingerprints and DNA on the ammunition box. Sir, did you watch the video where Ms. Gutierrez actually says to Mr. Benavides, this is the box I was pulling from?
Yes, I did.
And that box is taken and put into Mr. Benavides's patrol unit, correct?
The lieutenant placed it in his vehicle, yes.
Right.
So, Silent Murmur, if you say, I agree, he had no reason to pull the trigger, but if you say he pulled the trigger because, what are you saying? He wanted to murder his cinematographer. I mean, yes or no, is that what you're asking? So you're saying he pulled out the gun, pointed it at Helena and fired it because he wanted to murder Helena in front of everybody. I mean, is that what you're suggesting? That's right. It didn't require the pulling of the trigger. So, I mean, if you want to entertain the sabotage theory, you can say, how can I put it? I guess someone on the movie set wanted the movie to stop. Okay, so that makes a bit more sense. But I don't think the way you say it, it sounds like you're saying he pointed it at Helena because it's Helena. He's pointing it at the camera. And the reason he pulls the trigger, I think, is his own anticipation of the next scene. That's what I think the psychology is of it. I don't think, it wasn't called for in the script and that shouldn't have happened. But I certainly don't think there was anything beyond that. As you say, it wasn't supposed to happen.
So where's the controversy in terms of what box she was pulling from?
Part of it was to find where the live ammo originated. That information may have been on the outside of the box. Could have had Seth Kenny's DNA, could have had Seth Kenny's fingerprints, or anyone else where the box came from originally.
But sir, didn't you watch the second interview with Ms. Gutierrez where she actually held up a photograph for Corporal Hancock and said, this is a picture of our boxes of dummies, and not coincidentally, it matched identically to the box that she identified as the box that she was pulling rounds from that day. You watched that interview, didn't you?
Okay, guys, I'm going to kind of wrap up. As I say, I think it's very likely that I'm not going to be doing day 10. Obviously, if the Wi-Fi where we are is okay, then I will, but I think it's very likely that I won't be, which is too bad. I just want to thank everyone so long for being here. Appreciate your questions and comments. I think we learn something new every day, and the case achieves a greater kind of
10:30.
complexity.
Please don't talk among yourselves or anyone else about the evidence received here in court. Thank you.
I must say, I'm really sorry that yesterday I wasn't able to be on for longer. You guys can't believe how long it took to get certain information and get certain things up and running. It took about 2 hours, and by the time I was up and running, anyway, so that's just unfortunate, because I would have liked to have reviewed more Seth Kenny's testimony. So that really is unfortunate, but you can't, when you're traveling, you certainly can't be as consistent and omniscient as you are when you have everything set up and kind of ready. But I am grateful that I'm at least able to do a little bit of coverage, while from a remote location. So anyway, thanks, Robbie Robin. I just want to thank the mods. Thanks a lot, Terry, for being here. Chelsea as well. Thanks a lot for being here. Also, welcome to the new members, new subscribers. If you guys want to see a little bit of this hotel room, it's actually Airbnb. Brian, I want to put the camera on you. Say hi. There's Brian.
How's it, guys? How's it going?
Is that to kind of zip it while I'm doing a live, be very quiet there in the corner. So it's 1:15 in the morning, and although some of us are night owls, some of us aren't. So I'm going to be saying goodbye, and some of us have got to get up pretty early tomorrow. We've also got to check out of here pretty early as well, so that's the reasoning. I do think 2 hours 20 is not too bad for where we are. So, Mel Stiller says, nice to see you, Brian.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
So yeah, if you guys are interested in what's going on kind of behind the scenes, head to Team Peachtree. I've just put up a video of our trip to get here. It's kind of interesting. But keep your eyes peeled for more behind the scenes. It should be quite interesting. Thanks so much, Elizabeth. Appreciate it. Let's just have a look at some more of your comments. Alias says, I was guessing it was an Airbnb. Okay. Okay, so that is it. So I don't know when I'll see you guys again, but as soon as we are able to kind of get connected and get up and running, we will be. It could be tomorrow, but it could also be unknown. We'll see. But I'll be thinking of you guys, and I hope you guys will be thinking of us. Okay, so again, thanks for joining us. Yeah, I'll, even if I don't cover the verdict at the end of the case, I will cover it. I mean, when it happens, I will cover it with you guys as soon as I'm in a place that I can. So I'm not going to just let the case go without, at least dealing with that aspect. Okay, Laura says, where are you? I'm in Windhoek, Namibia, the capital of Namibia. So it's the 7th emptiest country in the world. Quite a remote location. Okay, thanks for joining us. Take care. See you guys next time.